We have the exciting topic of central bank digital currencies or CBDCs. If I can ask the slide just to move on by one slide, that's our title, that's the focus. And if the slide could then go forward again, fantastic. So before I briefly, I ask my two colleagues to briefly introduce themselves in the context of CBDC. I appreciate that this session is, of course, it's fintech, but it's a little bit different central bank digital currencies. So I just thought just to help us, if the slide could move on, sorry. Fantastic, thank you. I think it was there a minute ago. It's back now. Wonderful, thank you. So I just thought to frame this debate, because I appreciate that maybe CBDC is something most of us have probably heard about, but some don't follow every day. I just thought I'd put 5 points up there just to kind of set out where we're hoping to go with the conversation. So the first is that generally when people discuss central bank currencies, there are two different types of central bank currencies. Retail, CBDC, which, so you hear talk of the potential digital pound or digital euro. That's really what we're really talking about today. So it would be central bank currencies available for the general population. The second point, just by way of introduction, is there are some central bank currencies that are now live. So in fact, if I can just do a show of hands, who has heard of the sand dollar? You can raise your hand if you've heard of the sand dollar. Okay, okay. 3 of us, okay. For those watching a live stream, 3 hands went up. So the sand dollar was the first example in the Bahamas of a central bank currency going live. Also in the Eastern Caribbean, there's something called Dcash. In Nigeria, there is the e-Naira, so that's a big project in Africa. And I think it's now live in Jamaica. It's called Jamdex, with the slogan, "No cash, no problem," in Jamaica. So there's some examples of central bank currencies that are live. We're here today in the Eurozone, and as we'll get on to discuss, for example, the Eurozone, the US, the UK, I've put that they're consulting, they're investigating, developing. When I say procuring, that's kind of prototype models, kind of working out how, for example, a potential digital euro could work. But the people say they're yet to commit. We don't know whether there is going to be a digital pound. We don't know whether there's going to be a digital euro. So in that sense, it's kind of still at the early stages of CBDC. Today's context, we're going to try and keep it not so heavy on the technical side, and we're trying to look at the kind of public policy principles behind why would you have a central bank digital currency in the first place. And one bit of research I wanted to flag on that was the G7 CBDC public policy principles, which were published in October last year. So there's things going on at the kind of global level driving the discussion we're having. Much more recently, just a few weeks ago, there was a very interesting survey from the Bank for International Settlements in Switzerland, which surveyed 81 central banks about the kind of the progress of their digital currency. So just to get us all framed for this final session, I thought that was a way to kind of introduce it. But I'll now pass over first to Rainer from Estonia's central bank, just to kind of introduce himself and also his kind of interest in CBDC specifically as well. So, Rainer.
Thank you, Ian, and pleased to be here and meet you also in person after having some interviews online. My interest in CBDC is actually stemming from the wholesale that I mentioned when I was still a few years back working at the European Central Bank. Then we were really looking into new technologies related to securities settlement and post-trade. And then there was let's say, concrete need also from the market side to have a secure and safe settlement asset. But now it has a little bit changed also and going towards the retail sphere and the retail payment solutions. And here my interest would be maybe to find out where we can fill some gaps in the single euro payment area that are maybe existing. Naming one that pops into my head, for many years, let's say we have strived to have a, let's say, single euro payment area for cards as well, and there are market initiatives and maybe not so successful yet. So this is maybe the other angle that I have, and from which me and my team at Bank of Estonia are also looking into this investigation phase that the European Central Bank currently is leading.
Great, Rainer, thanks very much, Mehmet. Over to you to introduce yourself in the context of CBDC specifically.
Yes, thanks for the invitation, and it's great to be here. This is my first physical event after months, after COVID-19 started, so this is a special event for me. So as you said, there are many countries are now following and exploring the CBDC, especially the retail CBDC. So since 2019, I have been following the developments in the CBDC space. I'm especially focusing on the CBDC, retail CBDC and wholesale CBDC from the financial inclusion perspective, and I'm trying to understand what the value of CBDC for the low-income people, for the poor people, for the individuals who are excluded from the financial services. So as Ian said, the Bahamas officially launched its CBDC, which is called $10. Jamaica, Central Bank of Nigeria, China, they started their pilots. China, especially China, is very progressed in their pilots. In the past, I think between 2017 and 2018, Uruguay made a CBDC, a retail CBDC pilot, which was also very interesting. But different countries have different objectives when it comes to CBDC, especially retail CBDC. So, for example, enhancing the efficiency of domestic payment system is one of the objectives, or increasing the competition in the payment area, payment environment is another objective. Also, ensuring the access of individuals to central bank money is another objective. And also, I should also mention that when I look at the country reports on CBDC, the international organization reports on CBDC, I'm seeing that to reduce the adoption of cryptocurrencies in the country is another objective in countries. So as I said, to enhance financial inclusion is another objective, and this is my focus, especially in developing countries, in emerging markets. Countries are trying to look at how the CBDC, retail CBDC, can add value to the poor people. But to answer this question, but it generally depends on the design of retail CBDC, how the central bank designs the retail CBDC to advance financial inclusion in the country. Also, for me, it would be interesting to see how the CBDC will impact the banking industry, how it will impact the financial stability, and also how it will impact other digital payment solutions in the market, in the country, payment solutions. So, for example, the CBDC will be a complementary product to other digital payment solutions, or it will be substituting for other digital payment solutions. So these are the open questions that many countries are now looking at. So maybe last point I need to focus. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how the central banks shape with their retail CBDC with no harm to individuals and maybe little harm to financial service providers and intermediaries. So let me pause here.
No, thank you. So we've all kind of mentioned individual projects from the Uruguay example, which is kind of this slightly unusual, older example, I guess, of something that was. Did that fail? Remind me. Because I didn't mention Uruguay. They brought in a central bank currency, which is not particularly widely covered. And then is it still?
Actually, it didn't fail. It was a great project, by the way. So the pilot was around, as far as I remember, 4 or 6 months. And it was a successful pilot.
Right.
And the Central Bank of Uruguay announced that we will be continuing to look at the retail CBDC. So they're still in exploring and researching their CBDC plan.
Okay.
I mean.
And how many years ago was that trial? 4 years ago?
So again, between November 2017 to, I don't remember the exact date. It should be March 2018.
Okay. Well, it's interesting that they trialed it. It was successful, but then they're going back to kind of researching further. Okay. And on that, in terms of research projects that are live at the moment, is there maybe at least one specific example, either that you have been involved with or that's kind of catching your eye at the moment? I'll start with Mehmet first, but that's a particularly interesting project at the moment.
So it's a very hard question for me, actually. So because every project, CBDC project, has different interesting aspects, but I can say maybe one example from a developed country, Sweden. So Sweden actually started their e-krona project. The project is called e-krona project. So, so they started their project around 2016, 2017. So it was one of the early adopters. So they are closely looking at the design issues, central bank design issues, CBDC design issues, including the offline solutions, whether the available offline solutions could be. Also, should they use blockchain or not? This is one of the questions they raised, and they are looking at closely. And also, they are also researching whether it's possible to have some kind of limited anonymous payments without any ID or identification or verification of the customer. So that's why it's interesting.
Sweden is an interesting example because it's often used as an example of cash use being a country with very, very little kind of cash use, and so that's one of the kind of motivations behind this. Right. Go on.
Yeah, I had one more example.
Sorry.
So, of course,
Rainer, I'm going to come to you on Sweden, actually, because they've, a few days ago, I think, just launched the central bank has just launched this Riks Inst, is it? This kind of quicker payments thing, and it maybe comes back to your opening remark about kind of faster payments. So maybe come to you, Rainer, actually, briefly for your view on the Swedish example, but Mehmet, sorry, your second example.
So yes, we gave an example from developed countries, so I think I also need to give another example from a developing country. So the Bahamas and Central Bank of Nigeria's projects are also interesting because one of the main objectives of the projects are to advance financial inclusion, and they are designing their CBDC accordingly to advance financial inclusion. For example, they started to apply tiered CDD approach, tiered customer due diligence approach in their projects. So maybe we can talk later about these projects.
The technical side. Okay, Rainer, sorry. So there was my original question was: is there a particular kind of live trial or live project at the moment that you're finding particularly interesting for kind of this audience? And then, as I say, Sweden is really used within Europe as an example of a project that is quite well ahead. I know as you've mentioned, you've got experience of the kind of faster payments architecture. So I'm just interested if, I suppose the question would be, has the fact that Sweden's central bank has just launched this new, if I'm right, faster payments thing, actually potentially diminished the need for a CBDC in Sweden? Sorry, that's maybe a hot potato you can't answer, but there's two questions.
No, thank you for the questions. I will start with the easy one then. And examples that I find in particular interesting, I would name maybe East Caribbean, digital dollar, because it's a monetary union. They are using it in is it 7, 8 countries, islands across Caribbeans.
Yeah.
What I find interesting, they are solving there an issue because their payment system is not so developed. Now they have faster, better payment system, but they also have encountered the issue building on an external platform. And beginning this year, they were offline for 2 months. So this is, let's say, a responsibility and that the central bank later on has. It has to be online and available 24/7, 365 days per year. And another interesting aspect there is if there is an actual need and they are solving a concrete market issue, what I find interesting is that maybe only, let's say, based on the article, I know that there are 120 merchants only accepting it and 4,000 people using it. So I think there are some lessons to be learned also from these experiences. And the second thing example I would mention is maybe China, because I in particular like their solution that they have built, and they actually have like 260 million wallets opened. But then looking at the details there are only 47 cents within each wallet if you divide it. So it's also, you cannot, in numbers of wallets, it seems like a success, but in practical use, again, probably there are lessons learned, because if it's something that solves a concrete market issue in the retail field, then the usage should be higher. Now coming to Sweden, and indeed they launched instant payments, and this has raised the same question that you just posed, because they are really digitally also advanced. They had already instant payments, now they have another system, and they are also looking into e-kroner. Of course, their ambition is also to make let's say, central bank currency available to rural areas and so on. And the issue there is that shops are not accepting cash. So for them, it's really important to make it available, to make central bank money available to private individuals. And of course, this is also one of the objectives of the euro system, because in some countries cash is also declining, and they are that is why this objective has been outlined. Of course, there are also others that I maybe come back later on.
Yeah. Well, perhaps let's look at Estonia in that context. We've heard all today about Estonia as a digital nation. What is the kind of cash use situation in Estonia relative to, for example, Sweden?
In Estonia, I will start with instant payments maybe, because we have really made a jump and we are the front runner in Europe in terms of instant payments, or SEPA instant payments between banks, and also, let's say, for years already we have enjoyed the benefit of making payments within seconds, and now instant payments is also a norm between banks, and it's a challenge question. So what issue would central bank digital currencies solve? Because we have already instant payments. If you make central bank money instant, it doesn't add value. So where is the added value? And I think that's these are the discussions and investigations that we are really doing, and also being in a dialogue with market participants at the Eurosystem level, I would say. Coming now to Estonia, and if I'm asked by a journalist, so what's the difference or added value, then maybe some Estonian card payments, and that we all have accounts in the banks. This is really at a good level, and banks have made a great job, and we have also catalyzed this work. So we do not want to start competing with the central bank digital currency, and we of course see that the banking system would be the distributors of digital euros if we at some point of time reach this milestone, but today we are in an investigation phase, I would have to say.
Yeah. So we've, Mehmet particularly has mentioned financial inclusion as a particularly, perhaps it's no coincidence that a lot of the projects we've flagged, the Sand Dollar, certainly Dcash in the Eastern Caribbean, Jamaica as well, and Nigeria have all said they probably put financial inclusion almost as their top reason, whereas perhaps in the developed world, it's the key message more seems to be about financial stability and the potential threat of stable coins and crypto. So just before we come back to you, Mehmet, sticking with you, Rainer, is what's your view on, and I don't think this gets discussed so much, but on CBDC as a financial inclusion tool in Europe. I just wanted to flag a couple of things to kind of set the context. Is Fabio Panetta from the European Central Bank a couple of weeks ago said 5% of the adult Irish population do not even have a bank account. I don't know, Karen, if that, I'm sure that's correct. It came from Fabio Panetta. So, but yes, as I say, we often hear, why are we talking about central bank currencies? Well, there's this financial stability threat of stable coin, but I was, again, beyond that example of the unbanked in the developed world, watching a webinar a couple of weeks ago organised by the Digital Pound Foundation, which is very, very strong on this financial inclusion aspect in the developed world as well. So, Rainer, what's your view on that?
Yeah, I have to admit that in some European countries, financial inclusion may seem as an issue, or there are some certain numbers saying that people don't have a bank account or that they are unbanked, and this is an issue. However, I have to say that also remind us that in Europe we have a regulation establishing the right to have a basic payment account, and if you don't have an account, then you can go to the bank and get an account actually. So the issues why people are unbanked may be different, that they actually can have an account, and I have to say that looking at retail payments today and having a bank account, even if you're in your own country, you are charged fees, then you can, in the Eurozone, you can have digital banks which don't charge any fees, and you can use basic payment services anyhow. But again, there might be different issues why people cannot open accounts. And if we have central bank digital currencies, and we have clearly stated that we see that, for example, banks would then enable this, or we see that banks should distribute and offer this payment solution to end users. So what is the difference there? At the end of the day, if they do not open a bank account currently, why should they then? Because they will still have all the obligations to do the know your customer and take the risk. So I think these things are completely valid, should be investigated, and we need to figure out how to do that at the end of the day.
I mean, and I think that example goes across to the developing world. So I guess we don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but given that one of the main reasons people advocate for a CBDC is financial inclusion, and that's very much a challenge in the developing world. Mehmet, perhaps you can run through some of the opportunities, but also the challenges with CBDC as a financial inclusion tool in the developing world.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, definitely, especially in developing countries, the CBDC has a potential to advance financial inclusion. But in some countries, when we look at the details of the project, retail CBDC can be accessed by smartphones or by laptops, like web-based internet and etc. But we know that in many developing countries, individuals, especially women, cannot have access to smartphones, and women don't have reliable internet connection. So in this case, the central banks should consider that, okay, how these people can access CBDC. So there is, especially in developing countries, there is already a gender gap, digital divide between genders. So if the central bank designs a retail CBDC that can only be accessed with a smartphone with a reliable internet connection, then it cannot be accessed by women, and it worsens the digital divide.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that the central banks, especially in developing countries, might need to have, for example, first some solutions like, okay, the CBDC can be also accessed by feature phones, which means like the basic phones, not the non-smartphones. Also, there should be some sort of offline functionality of retail CBDC in these countries, so that if these people do not have a reliable internet connection or do not have a reliable electricity, they can access the CBDC easily and they can make transactions. This is how we can advance financial inclusion. So last word, yes, it has a potential to advance financial inclusion, but it really depends on how you design it.
Okay, and beyond the need for internet connectivity, is there anything else on the design side that you think is fundamental?
So I think China already started piloting this the card. So it's like a debit card, and you can see for example, the balance of CBDC and etc. So this could be helpful for financially excluded people. Also, when I last checked the Bahamas project, the $10 project, they were also thinking issuing a debit card for CBDC. So these instruments could also be useful for financially excluded people, I guess.
Okay. I'm going to come to the audience for questions shortly. Just does anyone have a question now, just so I can bear in mind if a question may be coming? Let's go for it now. Let's do it. It's then a question from the National Bank of Slovakia, if I recall.
Thank you. Maybe there is more comments than question, but thank you for your very interesting point. But I would like to share with you, we already made a survey about cryptocurrency and CBDC, and I can see that it's important to bring into account also the financial education, because a lot of people was lost. The differences between the cryptocurrency and CBDC? And I think that we in the Europe should to underline that the CBDC is not the gun against the cash. And we cannot, it's my opinion, we cannot promise them the huge financial inclusion, because in a lot of the country, we already have an instant payment. In my country, I think that 99.9% people have accounts, but the opposite side is that mainly pensioners which have money in the account, next day will withdraw all the money cash back, but it's a different story. But I think that one of the most reason why to start this project, but reasonably, and you, Rainer, very deeply to explain that what is the topics for the ECB, that we should be technologically prepared, because we spend the half of the day to bring the arguments how the government should use the fintech. And if we want to be the partner, and we don't want to give the head into the sand, that we should be technologically prepared. I don't think that it will be a revolution after the introduction of the CBDC. We should repeat to everybody that it's only the different form of euro. And this is not something different. Now we have we call it digital euro, but how we will call the money which we already have in the account? I think that is fair to declare that what is the CBDC in Europe, and What we are doing now, we try to find a solution not to destroy the financial stability and to find a way how we technologically prepare. And this is my view and my lesson learned we should to explain to people that digital currencies doesn't mean the crypto asset. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm interested to know, so would you be in favour of the introduction of a digital euro?
I think so, because we need to have a technology.
Okay.
I don't expect the revolution.
But so your view is actually that the European Central Bank, by doing this 2-year investigation phase, is going about things the right way. They're right to be investigating the prototype, but they'd also be right to launch it.
I am not proper person to judge if the investigation should be 6 months or 10 months, because if you have many people around the table, it's sometimes not too easy to find a compromise. But when I read, or when we organized the public discussion and we organized the discussion inside the central bank, and you will be surprised how many people which are working in the financial sectors don't know the details about the CBDC. And I think that this is important to explain that this is not nightmare, and they exist the toolkits for the mitigation of risk. Because I think that it's fair to create the list of the potential risk, and due that the euro is a currency which is using in the different jurisdiction, we definitely should to spend much more time for investigation. And I don't think that it's only the fun that ECB is prolong time for investigation. Okay, maybe 6 months is too much, maybe that is too long, but I don't think that if in the end of the day will be the technological solution, we can be happy. But I think that this mitigation of risk is crucial, and also the financial education and explanation. Thank you.
No, thank you. It was interesting that Rainer earlier on referred to we've all referred to the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank's Dcash project, which indeed had an outage. So I imagine that anyone who's nervous about the prospect of introducing a CBDC will have looked at that example, and they would have had heightened concern, I think, because if you introduce a central bank currency and it literally stopped working, they've said everyone with money in their account, it's safe, but clearly that's not. That probably wasn't a great day for CBDC advocates. Come back to the audience for more questions after a next question, which is actually, we have one. Sorry, Siobhan. Karen.
Hi, Ian, and sorry for taking the floor again, but I just wanted to pick up on a theme that we spoke about this morning, which was political will. And just to say that Minister Pascal Donoghue, as you know, is president of the Eurogroup at the moment, and he's been very strong on the fact that looking at the digital euro project is very much a priority for him and the Eurogroup. And he feels very strongly that political engagement is key to ensure that the project addresses the needs of our citizens and businesses, which the panel spoke about today. And he's having some detailed discussions with his counterparts at Eurogroup about the design of the digital euro. And this is in tandem with the technical work that's going on with the ECB and the Commission, so that the political process stays very much in line with what's happening at a technical level. And of course, just to remind people that the Commission's targeted consultation is open until the 14th of June, and it's important that we feed in all of our views into that. Thank you.
No, thanks, Karen. I mean, there seem to be all sorts of investigations and consultations. I remember the European Central Bank's own consultation into a digital euro, which had, I think they said, a record amount of responses for any ECB consultation. But it was interesting that the biggest concern flagged by people responding was privacy, which has kind of come up in previous sessions as well. But Rainer, I think you wanted to come back on.
Yeah, I want to actually on the same lines that you was just mentioned. What is the political rationale of CBDCs? And then when ECB also published the Digital Euro report back in 2020. It already outlined there clearly different aspects that I would like to mention here, and that make actually sense in today's also geopolitical context. So sovereignty and international role of the euro, I think that is one thing that also digital euro has to definitely contribute, and we let's say have to be prepared for the risks that may come from be it other CBDCs or cryptocurrencies or whatever, so that we are prepared. Then strategic autonomy, and maybe what I mentioned in the beginning, circling back, the missing pillar of the SEPA area, single euro payment area. We don't have actually any European card payment scheme or solution. Maybe this is something that can address this political issue, that we have an objective, but the market has not maybe delivered yet, and is struggling. And then, of course, backup solution. So the resilience aspect. This is really concretely a key topic. And mentioning offline in the context of financial inclusion, valid. I agree. But also considering how dependent we are on being online. So a solution that could facilitate offline payments between maybe even devices. That would be something. And currently the question is, we are also in a position to look into and maybe put some money where the private sector is not willing yet. This is something maybe to consider. And my favorite here is also that if you have a central bank digital currency, of course, it has to bear in mind innovation, how to digitalize economy, and maybe, of course, it's a given that you need to benchmark the best-in-class payment solutions to enable use, because if it's not really nicely usable, people will not take it up and use it. But you have to bear in mind also the new things where, again, maybe the market is not yet willing to put money in to support maybe really well Industry 4 or Internet of Things, which are just taking up, and this is something to consider when you design it, and then the aspect of technology and new technology versus, let's say, old technology. We ran an experiment of technology at Bank of Estonia as well, building on the KSI blockchain that is underpinning the Estonian digital government and the integrity of our data. So this just to show that new technologies can scale to the sufficient needs of the market today and maybe even in 10 years' time. So these things are all, it's a complex issue, and we have to be careful not hurrying into decisions and going through the buckets as Eastern Caribbean went through. Just imagine if your payment systems would fail for 2 months, what would you do?
So a potential digital euro could have been built in Estonia.
This is let's say this is a Eurosystem process. Bank of Estonia as a central bank is part of the discussions and the investigation, and we can just provide different angles so that at the end of the day we can make an informed decision.
Yeah, no, thank you. Our little digital clock is telling us that a glass of wine or a soft drink equivalent is not long away, but just a final round if anyone's got anything else. Right. Jerome, sorry, thank you. So we'll make this the final question from the floor, and then we'll come on to our final question internally. Jerome.
Thank you. I have a quick question on CBDCs, and how do you implement money laundering, anti-money laundering controls in a CBDC arrangement versus the classic financial sector?
Yeah, I can take this. So it's a great question. So maybe I should give some examples from the countries. So China now has a tiered CDD structure to meet the AML CFT requirements. So there are 4-level accounts. So the lowest level account can be opened with a mobile phone without giving any identification number or something like that. But level 2, level 3, level 4, it's like much stricter than the level 1. And also, it's also related to privacy issue, especially in Euro area, and actually in many countries, people are concerned about the privacy, so they don't want the central bank to see their data, their personal information. So in this case, Bank of England and Bank of Canada too are planning to adopt some structure where the intermediaries, where the financial service providers meet the AML-CFT requirements, they are onboarding the customers, and the central bank cannot see the personal information of customers. The central bank cannot see what individual did with their money and etc. So,
thanks, Mehmet. Rainer, do you want to expand?
I can add to that. In principle, of course, the obligation to do the checks and everything will be on the intermediaries at the end of the day. Now the question is whether there are options to make it more efficient, not to look at only one piece of the puzzle, but the whole picture, and how then to ensure privacy. And as Mehmet already said, you can have it kind of distributed, that the central bank doesn't have actually access or doesn't know who owns the funds, and only the intermediaries do. So we are kind of being able to mimic the current system, but make it even better. And here maybe I would mention a good use of blockchain, or also referring to the Estonian example. We all, each individual, each Estonian knows if somebody accesses his or her data online. And we have it distributed in different databases. So all these things are technologically possible. It is just to get. It will not definitely. It doesn't have to be a super database. Nobody wants to create something like that. It is too expensive and too prone for attacks. You can have it differently. Technologically, it's possible. It is just a confidence. Of course, if you take some countries, you would look at the government and think whether they would look into the data, and then some other governments ensure that everything is clear, transparent, and you actually would get a notice when somebody accesses your data who doesn't have to do so.
Thank you. It's amazing how so many of the topics that we've had throughout the day, so we've had mention of blockchain, but even digital ID, cross into this topic as well. One thing we're sadly not going to have time to discuss, but it would have overlapped with the previous session, is something called, I think it's called programmable payments. So it's where actually from a public policy perspective, if a central government is looking to disperse payments, they can do that by potentially, in theory, by central bank digital money, for example, with you have to spend this on school books or do not spend this on alcohol type approach. And there's a whole, probably sadly for us today, given time, a kind of separate kind of discussion on that. But thank you for your questions. I just want to kind of wrap things up with just one kind of concluding question, which is whether we think CBDCs are a foregone conclusion. Seems like they are in the Bahamas, the Eastern Caribbean, which would make a lovely destination for the next FinTech Lab, thinking about it. So if anyone's watching online from the Eastern Caribbean, hello. But that's the day's concluding question before we move next door. So do you think are CBDCs a foregone conclusion? Mehmet, do you want to go first?
So my short answer is no, it's not. I mean, really, it depends on where you are, which country you are in. And the countries, the central banks want to closely look at the CBDC design issues and etc. So after this exploration process, they will really decide what they will do with this plan. So it's not foregone conclusion. And also, actually, already I think Central Bank of Australia, it's Reserve Bank of Australia, already announced that, okay, we researched, we're still doing that, but at this point, we think we don't need a retail CBDC at this point.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, that's common in other areas as well, actually, who are kind of, as we've said, exploring the design, but maybe not quite ready to, at this point, press green. Rainer, final word from you.
I have to say that it's not for the central bank only to decide. In Europe, we have also the legislator, and definitely we cannot do it without changing the law. Otherwise, we can just introduce a new payment system for the payment industry to use. And then that's it. But if it's a digital euro, a central bank digital currency in private use or at the level of the status of legal tender, then this is for the legislator, and we can put input and then be prepared for it if we need to start issuing it. So I think this is, I cannot say yes or no at this point of time. And then maybe to call everyone to take part in the Commission's public consultation and to express their views, because this will feed into the, let's say, mindset also of the Commission and the final decisions.
Thank you. We'll ask the same question again in the Eastern Caribbean on the 1st of June 2023. Joking, maybe. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much both for your contributions. Thank you for your questions as well.